The next item on our agenda is talking about the Power Up strategy. And the Power Up strategy is a strategy implemented by the Rural Caucus, as the banner indicates. We've been working on this idea for several years, but we've actually implemented the strategy since the 1st of June. And it's basically to try to empower our rural areas of the state. As you know, Wisconsin has a large rural area, as many states do. And as you know, the map of Wisconsin has turned progressively red in rural areas. At one time, many of our rural areas were blue. In the 80s, for example, that we had far more seats in rural areas, and of course we controlled the legislature back in that era. So we have a challenge now of turning the tide back in our direction. And unless we do something different, we probably aren't going to be too successful. So we're trying to do something different. And one of the strategies is to have a more robust organizational structure in the rural parts of our state. And the two most rural congressional districts of the state of Wisconsin are the 3rd and the 7th congressional districts. So the 3rd congressional district has already formed Senate districts, Senate district task forces in all 4 of their Senate districts. And I'm going to, in a moment here, I'm going to have my friend Gary Hawley, who's chair of one of those, the 24th Senate District, talk a little about what he sees as the potential and the opportunity in that organization. But just to give you a little more introduction, the idea behind this is to provide a platform where the county parties can come together. And there's roughly 5 or 6 county parties in each Senate district. So roughly 5 to 6 counties represented in a Senate district. And county parties in rural parts of the state are pretty fragile, because typically they're pretty fragile. But there are stars, there's star counties, like Gary represents one of them, Portage County. They've been strong for years. However, that doesn't always translate over into strength in the rest of that district. So we're trying to figure out a way to help translate some of that energy in the Portage County type parties, the Eau Claire County parties, the La Crosse County party. Those stars, we're trying to figure out how to partner them with the other county parties in their Senate district to have a more robust structure. Also, these are kind of independent structures, so they can go out and recruit allies of groups such as the Our Revolution people or whoever else is willing to come in and meet and work together, environmental groups or whatever. So we can have a platform for all of the progressive energy to come together and build a collaborative effort in these Senate districts. So I'm going to turn this over to Gary here and let him say a few words about his experience in working on this project and his sense of the vision for the future. My friend Gary Hawley. Thank you, Gary.
Good morning. I'm Gary Hawley. It's Hawley. It's wrong in the agenda, but I want to thank Nate for giving me 1 hour and 45 minutes, or 2, and I decided to take the 2 minutes, so thank you. I'm co-chair of the Portage County Democratic Party, and we got together about 4 months ago with Portage, Adams, Wood, Waushara, and Monroe County, and we sat down and had a discussion. Decided that we'd have these every month, and one of the things we got together, and Portage County has a good painting system. and we get a template. It costs about $125, but we put out 150 signs, 4x4 signs, every election. And these other counties that are smaller counties, we're going to share with them, so they can paint some signs, so they don't have to spend $125 for a template. By getting together with the county parties, we lost Senator Lassa in the last election, and that was right in Portage County. She won by 2,000, but we lost in the rural area. The new area, because of the redistricting, we lost. She lost in there. So I don't like having a Republican senator. So I want to make sure we still got a few more years, but we want to show whoever the candidate is that the county chairs are ready to work with our candidate. It's a team, and this is what it should be, is a team. We're getting together. Some of these are brand new chairs that have never ran a party before, and they need a little help. And even as a 21-year member, chair of Portage County, I still need help. So I want to thank Nate for coming to every one of our meetings and helping us move along. We're really moving along now. So I don't know what else you want me to say, but thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. So you can see there's a lot of energy in Gary's approach, and we need all the energy we can get, right? So, thank you. Moving on, I want to talk a little about the next Senate district, which we want to try to form and get energized, and that is in the most rural congressional district of the state, the 7th. And we are pleased to have chairs from one of those key Senate districts represented here today, and that's the 29th. And the 29th Senate district, of course, because of the genius of the redistricting that the current legislative team has, they've created this oblong Senate district that runs from here all the way to Hayward. At least 100 miles long, and on a diagonal, a narrow diagonal. So it's a very challenging district. However, we're hopeful that by working together, we can create an effective partnership between all of the chairs of that district, and we can do something we haven't been able to do in the past. So I'd like to introduce a couple of the county chairs who are here with us today to talk a little about the opportunities there are in the 29th. And I'm pleased to have two of the chairs who have run in that district here to say a few words about that. And Nancy, are you willing to go?
Sure.
Okay, Nancy's chair of the Marathon County Dems, as we have established, and I'd like to have her share a few words. Nancy.
Running for public office can be one of the most gratifying things you can do, and it can also be one of the loneliest things you do, because it usually turns out that you and your core group of people are what's really pushing you forward. And in the 29th Senate District, if we are ever to find a candidate that can beat Jerry Petrusky, what we need to do is all of us county chairs in the 29th need to get together. We need to pool our resources to make sure, I mean, as rural as it is, that our candidate has all the resources they need, that it has people that can go out there for them, do the doors, get the signs out, like Gary had said as well, painting the signs. I know the last time when I ran for the 86, we had my signs out, I think, by the time the ground thawed, and it still didn't help. But if I would have had more backing, more people behind me, I would have felt much better about what I was doing. So I really think that if all the county chairs and the 29th can get together, pool our resources, when we do doors for everybody. You do it for your Senate, do it for your assembly, all the way down the line. You should be having everybody's information with you. So, and I'm hoping we can do that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, I'd like to have a word from Paul Demain. Paul hails from the Hayward area, and you know he is a very active media person in the Indian Country News Service, and a great advocate for energetic leadership in our North Woods. Paul.
Thank you, Nate. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've been contacted by a couple of people about the Grassroots Festival here today, and I realized once I got here to look at the agenda that the reason there's been some confusion is that I'm both on this panel and the next one, so I'm really overly prepared for the next panel, but I jotted some notes down as that I think will shine a little bit of light on a few of the things that Nate and other people here have talked about. I was a Senate candidate against Senator Petrowski in the last term, and I'm looking forward to see and help out whoever emerges as a candidate against him in this next term, and to help him as best I can. So my suggestion is what I think a lot of people are doing here and have been talking about the last couple months. We really need to go out as the Democratic Party and reach out to all those organizations in our community that have those interests. And if we need to take the time to actually chart what that might look like in terms of common interest. I know that I was at a couple of conferences recently on restorative justice in the judicial system, because so many counties are overburdened with crime and trying to deal with the number of inmates they have in jail and budgets and everything else. But the discussion kind of emerged out of here, which is similar to many conflict resolution, and that is sitting down and having a meal with someone, sitting down and having coffee with someone and trying to chart what our mutual interests are. And most of the time we find that we start envisioning what the future might be like for our children and grandchildren, that we find the most common denominators. In the indigenous community, most of the tribal politicians are charged with legislating for the 7th generation. It's an idea that a lot of people find very abstract and hard to accomplish, because it's kind of like saying this in the late 1800s when our elders were negotiating with the U.S. government to cede under the Treaty of 1842 and 38 and 54 northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan to the U.S. government for their use in order to obtain the lumber and the mineral rights and other things that made this country great. The resources that were transferred to the United States. The elders sat there and said, but how are my children 7 generations from now going to feed themselves and take care of themselves? And their resolution was to cede the territory and reserve the hunting, fishing, and gathering rights on public lands. Something that's very controversial in on a lot of levels, but in the long run, I think has led to the protection of our resources in a better way than ever before. And certainly with this administration in power, we now have an entity in Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission that counters, or in fact may perhaps have replaced the DNR and their lack of management of water and the deer herd and all the other issues that we've seen in the last couple legislative sessions, high capacity wells, the regulation of runoff, CAFOs, and all those issues. I think that in some extent a lot of us fear will only degrade the environment of northern Wisconsin. So organizing all these subgroups and finding out who they are. Real estate people who are concerned about the values of their lands on issues, resort owners, hunters, fishermen, local community people who are in favor of renewable energy. We need to go out and explore with those groups and talk with those people to find out what are common threads so that at least we neutralize negative feelings about each other. I have here time off. You know, some of our leaders and organizers in our community literally need to have some time off. Keep that in mind. Perhaps we're finding cycles of off and on which allow some of the people in our communities just to simply relax a little bit because we exhaust ourselves. And there are people that literally work themselves out of the system where they need to get out of the system for a little while and take some rest. I have young people. We need young people. We need to figure out how to get the young people into this room, into the room of our political parties because they're not there. And we need to find some way to make sure that they understand the importance of this leadership in terms of what the future is going to be for themselves. So early organizing, I know Nancy was saying she's getting her signs out or making them or whatever, but indeed I think that preparation is very essential. I'm glad to see that we have numerous candidates announcing very early. I like the idea of a primary within our own party. I know that it takes resources to do that, but I think it also allows an opportunity for grassroots people to voice their opinion on the direction of where the political party or the political movements need to go, and it gives us some choice. People shouldn't just be shut out for lack of funds or lack of organizing. We ought to give people an opportunity to see that if they can take off. One of the things I suggest for the 29th district, or even the two northern Wisconsin congressional districts, is reaching out to the tribal governments. We have 11 tribal governments. Those tribal governments in many cases are looked upon as the last salvation for environmental protections. I hate to think that people are just simply saying we don't need to deal with a lot of things because the tribes will. They are overwhelmed and exhausted in many ways as well, trying to provide things for their people, and but there needs to be a protocol there of outreach. Google Wisconsin Tribal Government Contact List, you can find that. Who are the tribal chairmen, who are the other legislative people, and write your letters and introduction, and go there and listen. Go there and listen as candidates and as people who want to get organized in the area. There's 11 tribal governments. There's Great Lakes Intertribal Council up in Lac du Flambeau, which is a hub organization, the Chippewa Federation, which oversees the Chippewa tribes that have off-reservation fish and wildlife rights, and Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, which is the technical aspect of looking at the health of our resources in northern Wisconsin. By the way, the 29th Senate District is more than 100 miles long. Wherever Nate is or whoever said that, it's more like 167 from Wittenberg, Wisconsin to Sealy. I think it's about the same from Sealy down into Marshfield. Coming down today, getting up while it was still dark out at 5:30 in the morning and packing and getting a car to come down here reminded me of what the campaign was like. Today's there's an event in Marshfield. You get up early, you drive all the way down there, and then you turn around and drive back, and you hope that there's other things that you can do along the way between here and there. And yet it's important to get to all areas of the district. It's also important to remember that we have a growing community of color within the 29th district in northern Wisconsin. Something like 8% of the community is now tribally oriented between the Ho-Chunks from Wittenberg, living here in Marathon County, the Ojibwe people up on the Wakudere Ojibwe reservation, the Hispanic people who have come in to work on the farms in Taylor County and stayed, a growing African American community and the Hmong community here. We need them at the table. They will become a very important constituency in the future, as all the dynamics tell us. We need to bring them into the fold. So, with that, our charge is to figure out how to bring those farmers and those labor organizations and people that I remember growing up on South 3rd Avenue that used to walk to 3M and Connor Lumberland with their little lunch bucket each day, representing good paying jobs that no longer exist here in the industrial district that ran through the middle of town. But I think that Wausau's done a wonderful job at beginning to convert the idea that that was an industrial district back to some of the things they're doing with along the riverbanks of the Wisconsin River that are very beautiful, that bring people back into these areas. Those are progressive ideas that have won in the past and will win in the future, looking at how to rebuild our communities. So, thanks.
Next, I just want to reinforce that you can see that Paul has been thinking about this stuff a long time, and my friend Waldo, who's sitting up here in front, those guys have worked together up there in the Hayward area in the Sawyer County, and they've done a really great job of bringing together the whole community, and it's exemplary what you guys have done. And we need to use that as a model of bringing communities together. And it's based on our commitment. None of this stuff is easy. And we delude ourselves if we think that any of this organizational stuff can be done on the cheap or on the easy. Particularly, we will never be able to match dollar for dollar our opponents. So we need to figure a more creative way to try to match them. And we do have the numbers of people on our side. Our problem is, how do we energize them? How do we organize them? How do we make them an effective force? And that's what this 29th Senate District idea is about, and what grassroots energy around the state is about, and what community organizing is about. And so all of us need to be strategic in the way we do things. It's not enough just to, energize and have an event that doesn't really have a strategic element to it. So I'd like to bring on David Barnhill, who is working in the northern part of the 7th Congressional District, and he has got some experience working on trying to bring these various groups that he has been able to energize forward, and I think he can give us a little view of maybe some opportunities going forward. David, thanks for coming.
How's the microphone? I get blasted when I'm sitting over there. Is this okay? What's that?
Hearing you great back here.
All right. My wife never does, so this is good to get this. So, who am I? I'm the outlier here. I'm up north in Oneida and Vilas counties. I'm the local leader of the chapter, Northwoods chapter of our Wisconsin Revolution, and also Citizens Climate Lobby. Nate asked me to speak to the challenges of organizing in a rural area, and the first thing that came to mind was we're so damn spread out. Our Wisconsin Revolution Northwoods chapter draws from people from 6 different counties. And so how do you keep people engaged when they're so spread out like that? I mean, if they have to drive over an hour to come to meetings, they're not as likely to come to meetings. So I've got just 4 suggestions on dealing with that dispersion. The first one's the obvious one, and that's motivation. They got to know it's really bad. All they have to do is look at the news so they know that. But you have to present a very clear sense of visions and values and possibilities. Whatever group you're working with, if you can present that, then you can help keep those people connected. The second, as many people note, there's no substitute for personal contact. So if somebody lives an hour north of you, or an hour west of you, or southeast of you, maintaining some kind of personal contact with them is going to maximize the chance that they will keep going and be interested in what your group's doing. And third, is very important, is to provide them action opportunities that they don't need to come to a meeting for. So even if they say, I just can't come to a meeting, you can say, well, here's 3 different kinds of actions that you can do to be an active and productive part of this group. And if they feel that way, then they're going to be more likely to be a part of the group and be active. And then finally, one thing to think about is local selves. For instance, I'm up in the Minocqua area, an hour west of us is Park Falls. They're considering, and they have a small cluster of people that are interested in this. So instead of trying to get them to come to all of our meetings, help them form a small cell, and then that can be a mini group that is part of your larger group. And that way they're not feeling so alone, they're feeling more connected. And then you can go out and visit that local cell to keep things going. So those are just a few ways that we can try to overcome that geographic dispersion. Another main point I wanted to make, actually Paul made, and I just want to pick up on that. If I was to lead a Senate district organizing group, the first thing I would do is I would go out and create a list of all the progressive organizations, environmental organizations, and so on down the line, and make contact with them. You already have people who are engaged, you already have a structure out there. If you're going to be building a robust network, connect with what robust networks are already out there. And you go to them, don't wait for them to come to you. One of the things I would really emphasize is casting a wide net on this. I mean, if I was to set up a Senate district power up, I'd go obviously to something like our Wisconsin Revolution or Citizen Action, but also other kinds of groups. Citizens Climate Lobby, for instance, is a robustly nonpartisan group. They do not get involved in elections. They are focused only on one issue, climate change, and one policy, carbon fee and dividend, and they try to appeal to conservatives. But by connecting with a group like that, you can start drawing in people that wouldn't come to our Wisconsin Revolution, for instance. So you want to be reaching out to groups that aren't traditionally identified as progressive, because that way you can expand the base of people you're connecting with. And then, as Paul mentioned, if you can find out similar concerns, in this case like climate change, then you can pull people in to take action and get votes. And then another thing, especially as far as organizing in rural areas, is to look for and try to cultivate local coalitions of progressive groups. So what Nate is talking about is at the Senate level. What we've done in the Oneida and Vilas County level is created a group called the Northwoods Alliance. And this is a loose coalition of about 18 different groups. It doesn't take a lot of time. We have a shared calendar of events, so we promote each other's events. We've got a shared email listserv. We meet about quarterly because everybody's out busy anyway, we don't have to meet. But that's another kind of structure to draw on. Instead of having our Wisconsin Revolution Citizens Climate Lobby League of Conservation voters in our area all by themselves, bring them together, form a local group, they feel connected, and then if you come in, for instance, at the Senate level, you can connect with that group and the word gets out. So there's various ways that you can plug into and draw from these progressive groups. But one final thing I think it's very important when you're connecting with other groups is you want to go to them and say, how can we help you? Instead of saying, I want your support, what are you doing? What you're doing is cool. Here's how we can help what you're doing. Once you've established that relationship, then it's more likely they're going to be helping you as you go along. And one final comment, this is sort of more speculative about organizing, but one of the things the Oneida County Democratic Party is starting to do now is to organize at a micro level in the sense of having ward captains or town captains. Someone who will volunteer to be a point person at a very local level, who will know the voters much better than, say, the county chair would know them, and certainly somebody who's just dealing with the Senate district. I think this is going to be interesting. We'll see how many of these wards or towns that we can cover. But if you want to develop a robust network, also think at the micro level, at the ward or township level. And if you can have one person that is a contact there that you can connect with, then again, I think you are more able to be drawing on people and moving this whole thing forward. So there's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Really spot on there, David, with the issue of this micro-organizing in the 4 Senate districts, in the 3rd Congressional District. All of them have talked about and are strategizing about exactly that point of trying to figure out how to work in the small communities. This is where we have been weak or completely inadequate. And it's a strategic focus to get at those communities. It really requires a unique kind of approach. But the 17th Senate District is in the South has a plan that they're developing to work on that. They're targeting communities throughout their Senate district, and they're trying to identify contacts in those districts. And a number of other Senate districts are talking about that. This is a case where creativity is the art of the day. Nobody knows the best way to do this. Let's get out there and try. Let's try different things and see what seems to work. And then when we have these networks on these Senate district levels, we can share those ideas. So it's not just one county party or one organization by itself doing something, and maybe it works well for them, and it takes another 10 years before that idea gets out to, a broader audience. We have the structure now with these task forces to disseminate information quickly across a real large, wide geographic area. And that's one of the purposes behind creating these task forces, is a robust system of communication, sharing resources, sharing training, and building these collaborative relationships that both Paul and David and Nancy and Gary talked about. Because rural parts of Wisconsin, rural anywhere, is about personal relationships. We all know that. We just haven't taken very good cognizant of how to use that. Thank you, panel members, for your input. I appreciate your time and effort. And we're looking forward to moving forward with the 29th Senate District. Now I want to turn to the other side. Nancy, I'll invite you to come over here, because this is a community effort over here. This is the Wausau community. And I'd like to have Joel come up and talk about our effort to try to bring the Wausau community together, much in the spirit of what David talked about, trying to bring the different groups in Wausau together. And Joel and Nancy and Josh, all plus their allies, are working on this. So talk to us, Joel.
All right, thank you, Nate. And before I get into my speech, I want to just lift up Josh Dirks, Nate Timm, John Stanley, and all of the folks that have really played an active role. Bob Krigo in making this happen. There's an old joke out there that former County Board Supervisor Jim Rosenberg told me. He said, when liberals or progressives form a firing squad, they like to form a circle. And the reason I want to bring that up is I think that Nate Timm, John Stanley, Josh Dirks, and all the folks involved in this are trying to make it so we're not in a circle anymore, right? The last election, I feel, has created that to be even worse, because we have this kind of division of people who maybe are loyal to a party, but maybe are not, are loyal to issues. And so I think that that's why issue-based organizing is the answer to a lot of our problems. 99% of the things that we all care about are the same, right? Maybe our number one issue isn't the same. But for the most part, we all care about having a good environment. We all care about having family-sustaining jobs in the northern part of our state so that our young people will stay here, so that we can see our grandkids and our kids, right? We all believe in that. And we all believe in protecting the freedom of everyone. I don't think anyone in this room is going to tell me that they don't believe that everyone deserves equality, or that we should not worry about polluting the river or the lake, right? And so, but once you add the Republican or Democrat or Bernie or Hillary or Green Party or Independent, any of that, you push people away. I've experienced it. I've experienced it as a candidate. I've experienced it as someone who's been active in the local Democratic Party. And then I've experienced the flip side by working with an organization like Naomi that doesn't endorse candidates, that doesn't talk about Republican or Democrat. They talk about public transit. They talk about reducing the prison population, treatment instead of prison, right? And these are things people can get behind. And believe it or not, there's Republicans that go out and knock doors for public transit, right? So that's great. That's how we can connect the divide, you know. And I think, and I hope you don't get mad at me, Nate, but I'm not going to just talk about Wausau. Because when you get north of Point, Wausau is about where the most activity is politically that people are aware of in the news. And there's a reason for that. Our media network is huge. So when we want to combat someone that's got millions of dollars, we want to go where we can get the most media so we can challenge them, right? So if they're going to tell us this healthcare replacement bill is great, and we know it's going to raise premiums by 30 to 60%, we want that message out there, and we want to get it out there as far as possible. So we get doomed into organizing in places like Wausau because of the media market. The further north you go, the harder the media market gets. And in farther north Wisconsin, it's a Minnesota media market. So if you're a candidate and you're trying to get some of those folks up there, you got to try to work with Minnesota to get your message out. Or if you're an action group like Citizen Action, same thing. But David brought up the key. The key is meeting with people and listening to them. Paul also brought this up. And for those of you who don't know, I was in the congressional primary last year. And one of the big things that Paul told me that really, really rang true was go and listen. Don't tell them what you want to tell them. Go and hear what they have to say. And I was very well received once they knew that's why I was there. There was some resistance at first because they figured I was just going to tell them everything that I wanted them to hear. But that wasn't what I did. And it was because of people like Paul, people like Nancy, people like Dorothy Miller, who's in the room, Rita Pockel, who's back there, all of these folks, David Gorski, I met him back during that campaign. We all started to network. We started to reach out to people. We've got Sue Menzel in the crowd, Waldo Ask, all of these folks drove very far. And so that's what it is connecting and networking and finding those bridges where we can stand together on an issue. Like me personally, my number one issue is environmental. My grandpa raised me in the woods, taught me how important the plants in the woods were for us. At an early age, I learned about the edible plants in the woods. I do maple syrup, I do honey. You know, what's the number one thing for me? And unfortunately, we don't see a lot of investment in that. But when you go around the northern part of the state, you find a lot of people that care about this. And that's where our power comes in. And so I guess I'd like to leave you all after this speech thinking about how we can increase our power, how we can continue to work together, and how we can make sure that that circular firing squad becomes a straight line, and we actually are targeted at going against those who oppose the things we care about. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you, Joel. There's too many J names. So next, I'd like to have Nancy kind of reiterate her experience here in the Wausau community, and it's great that Nancy and Joel and Josh are all of a common mind of working cooperatively together. That's one of our key elements in trying to make progress in all of this, is this desire to suppress the tendency on the left to splinter. It is really one of our deadly sins. And it's, I think you all understand that we got a lot of committed people with different ideas, different issues, people who do a lot of reading, do a lot of thinking, and they naturally have different ideas. And that's great. That can be a real asset. But we also have to figure out how to work together. So sometimes we have to suppress our individuality a bit to form a community. And that's I think we all like the idea of community. So we have to keep that value in symmetry with, in harmony with our individuality and our great ideas. And I think we're coming around to that, but we got ways to go. Nancy.
First of all, I want to mention that tomorrow morning there will be kind of a get-together over at the Democratic office on the corner of 3rd and Sherman. Anybody is invited to come. It's just going to be a brainstorming to see what worked today, what didn't work. So if you have any input, tomorrow morning at 9:30. We will have coffee and some brunchy items, and we invite anybody and everybody to attend that. You're being the chair of the Democratic Party in a time where Democrats are really taking a lot of bashing. I find myself being more involved than ever in issues, as Joel had said. And I like to think of our local Democrats as being the hub. We put out a lot of the information that you need to all the different groups that are out there. We're all working for the same goals, be it citizen action, be it Marathon County Labor Council, be it get the money out of politics. Everybody in our group in the Democratic Party also belongs to a lot of issue-based things, and we're all, like, I think, wearing ourselves pretty thin lately too. I would really like to say this last year, what I saw was a lot of young people coming forward with the Bernie campaign, and we managed to snare a few of them that stayed with us, and we'd like to see even more, because we want you to know that what the young people think, that this is important. As Paul had earlier said about generations ahead, a lot of us are getting a little older, I don't want to admit that, but we need to pass the torch on and get people involved and get them to run for public office. It's the only way we're going to change things. And just to really stay engaged. And we call our local party the Marathon County Democrats and Friends, because a lot of people don't care to join, they don't want to be labeled. But I think it's very important that we get every one of those issues out there and that we all work on them together. Like Joel said, let's go in a straight line, let's go forward, and let's get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Josh, you want to give us a last word? You don't want to tell us anything about Poland? Josh just came back from a 2-week trip to Poland, and last night he was telling me a lot of interesting things about the politics of Poland. Why don't you just come and say a few words? He's not real ready to jump up here and grab this microphone, and I really respect that, because he's a guy who does a lot of thinking. He does a lot of work that's kind of below the radar. And those are the kind of people that many of us have been throughout our lives, and there are many of us who are out there, and we need a whole new kind of style to reach out to those folks. So Josh is right on the front line of that work, and I thank you for all the work you put in to make this possible here, Josh. Give us a few words.
All right. Thanks. As Nate said, I'm usually behind the scenes, like facilitating things like this and meeting a lot of great people. And like Nate said, I just got back from Europe and saw a lot of very interesting things. Coming off of a subway and almost being run over by legions of bikes on their way to work. It just made me glow for the rest of the day. Stockholm is just overrun with bicycles, one of the happiest places in the world, and they're trying to keep things clean, public transportation. It's a really nice place to be, and Poland's facing a lot of the issues that we're facing here as well. They'll log some of the oldest growth forests in all of Europe, and the government's obviously probably making money hand over fist on it, but it's all written off as, you know, trying to protect, but you don't protect with gigantic machines that are mowing down, you know, the lungs of our planet. So, you know, this is happening all over the world, and my cousin works as a lawyer in Warsaw, and he's fighting the same fight over there. So, you know, it's got to happen at a local level. You gotta reach out to people, talk to people on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, definitely to pull together all of our different voices and get some unity and get a larger voice. You know, we're gonna hopefully make some good change. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Okay, we're getting ready to transition. And before we do, I want to call to your attention. If any of you in your community want to step forward and be one of those leadership people in your community, it might just be your coffee clutch. It might just be a few of your friends or relatives. Stop by the Grassroots Network table and remember, it's a network. It's really open to people of all different issues and persuasions. It's a matter of a way to get people organized to take action on behalf of their community. And